Preface. Guided by the Sharia laws, Islamic banking is grounded on the laws on the belief that all types of interest is forbidden. Investing in businesses that deal in business of pork or alcohol, or those that lead to gossip such as media or are against Islamic values such as pornography, is completely prohibited. Speculative transactions are also banned in this law. Because of a different way of running their financial system, the regular banking financial instruments cannot be used in Islamic banking. However, the banking and finance in Islam do have the same motive as the conventional banking, which is to generate money for the banking organization, which is by lending capital while also keeping within the boundaries outlined by the Islamic law. Instead of the basic principle which the conventional banks use, that is transfer of risk, the Islamic banks follow the principle of risk sharing. The laws of Sharia vary from country to country. While in some countries they are liberal, in other places they follow the exact interpretation of Sharia laws. Introduction. Operating according to Islamic law, Islamic finance is a financial system which operates according to the laws of Sharia. The biggest characteristic in the Islamic banks is that they don't charge interest. According to Sharia law, money is just a way of describing the value of a thing and doesn't have any type of value of its own. This is why money is not permitted to make more money if either lent to someone or deposited in the bank. Islamic banks generate money by sharing the risk of investment with investors. They basically run on profit and loss system. In short, Sharia-compliant bank uses the money of depositors to purchase assets and then give the depositors a share of profits made by those assets instead of making money through loan offerings and mortgages. Even interest is not charged on them. There is a sturdy financial system which is placed in the Islamic finance. Like other financial systems, Islamic financial also have fund managers, banks, insurance companies, capital markets and investment firms. All these entities are administered by Islamic law and the finance industry guidelines which apply to their conventional equivalents. Even though the Islamic finance industry is not quite old, the concept of economics has been in place for about 1,000 years since the 12th century. There are many Muslim scholars who have offered important conceptions of economics in Islam, which continue to be followed today also. However, social and political upheavals did not let Islamic finance come up for several years. It was recently in 20th century that the scholars of this community began to ponder over these topics and lay the foundations for Islamic finance industry, which emerged in 1970s. Chapter 1. Establishment of Islamic financial institutions. Setting up Islamic banks was not easy, and there was much pre-work that was done. There were many governments and institutions that were involved. Several conferences were held, and Islamic scholars with knowledge of Islamic laws were needed to apply the theory in practice to set up the first interest-free banks. Conferences held were Karachi, 1970, Conference of the Finance Ministers of the Islamic Countries, held 1972, the Egyptian Study, Mecca, 1976, the First International Conference on Islamic Economics, and London, 1977, International Economic Conference. Located in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the Islamic Development Bank was the first financing institution which was founded in 1973 by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which was then known as Organization of the Islamic Conference. The activities of the bank began only on October 20, 1975. The first Islamic bank was set up in Dubai, which continues to function today also. Dubai Islamic Bank in 1975. The first Islamic mutual fund investing only in Sharia-compliant equities were established in Indiana in 1986 by the name the Amana Income Fund. Between 1980 and 1985, there were many deposits made and the investors were promised rich gains, both monetary and religious. In 1988, there was a halt in this investment in Egypt when the state suspected that Islamic movements were hoarding money and reserving funds for war, and thus a media campaign was launched against the Islamic banks. This financial panic had heightened so much that there was a situation of bankruptcy in several companies. However, this did not ruin the core of Islamic banking, and the establishment of several financial institutions continue to happen and are still happening throughout the world. By 1996, even United States-based Citibank began offering Islamic banking services. They opened the Citi Islamic Investment Bank in Bahrain. The rate of growth of the Islamic banks has been between 10 and 15% each year since 2008. Chapter 2. Principles of Islamic Banking. As discussed above, Islamic banking is guided by Islamic economics and follows the principles of Sharia. The main law in this type of financial system is that all types of interest are prohibited, and this interest is referred to as riba. There is another term which is used for interest in the Islamic financial institutions, which is known as usuri. In conventional banking, interest means a nominal amount charged on the principal amount, but usuri is described as significantly high charge on the principal amount. Riba is used for both interest from conventional banking and usuri. However, there are many important Islamic institutes and schools which do not differentiate between interest and usuri. Besides this, gharar and ma'asir are also prohibited. Gharar is a performing speculative transactions. In short, it means all uncertain transactions are forbidden in this system. Ma'asir is associated with business in gambling and wine and is forbidden by Sharia law. There is a fiqh al-muamalat in place which describes how the transactions should take place. There are concepts such as cost, plus, or murababa, joint venture or musharaka, leasing, la, and safekeeping or wadia. Broadly, there are 4 principles which cover Islamic finance on whole. Usuri or interest is forbidden, ethical standards, social and moral values, business and liability risk. Usuri or riba or interest in forbidden. Islamic finance has been deeply grounded on the rules written in the Holy Quran, and the Muslims religiously follow the rules in it. The first concept is taking and giving a specific amount on interest is austerely prohibited. Money should not generate profits on its own. When an economy is infested because of riba, the happiness of the complete society is in danger. If the investors look forward to guaranteed returns and rates of interest, then the money that they get back in return will never be fruitful. In fact, there are negative impacts. Ethical standards. The second principle revolves around ethical standards. It is the religious duty of a Muslim to ensure that the money that they invest in is good. They should keep a close eye on where they are investing their money. Most Islamic investing comprise of serious thoughts on the business in which to be invested. They look into the products that the company deals in, the policies, the services that it has to offer, and the overall impact of the business on the society. There are special rules in share trading when it comes to Islamic investments. They follow the Sharia law before they invest in any company. Social and moral value. All those who adhere to the teaching of Quran need to care for the poor and helpless. The financial institutions Islam need to make arrangements to offer special services to those who are in need. It is not only the non-profitable organizations or charitable trusts that they are looking forward to, but they can also be used in giving out loans without interest or profit, which is known as Qard al-Hasan. The Qard al-Hasan also includes giving money to the needy who need for treatment or wish to study but don't have the means to pay for their fees instantly. Qard al-Hasan is given out by the bank for just a year without any charges. Business and liability risk. The last principle deals with the thought of how fair a business is. Both the parties doing business should be willing to share in both profit and loss of the business. In order to get a return, the financier should be willing to bear the risk of the business or offer services such as providing an asset, else the financier here is a sinner or an economic parasite as per the laws of Sharia. They believe in the saying of Prophet Muhammad, profit comes with liability. If one wants profit, one should be ready to bear the loss. Islamic law differentiates lawful profit from other types of gain. This is done by relating profit with the probability of loss. All Islamic institutions have to establish a council or the Sharia board that will advise the financial institution on these dealings. The board may comprise of religious scholars trained in Sharia, lawyers and bankers. Types of Islamic lending. A two-tier Mudaraba model was recommended for riba-free banking by Mohammed Najatul al-Ashdiqui. Mudaraba is a business contract where one party is the brains of the business while the other sees the financial part. The bank would be supply capital while the depositor would be on one side and the entrepreneur of the business would be on the other side that would run the business. There would be many other fixed return models supporting this thought such as ijara or leasing, istisna or cash advance of manufacture assets and salam or cash advance to purchase agricultural produce, etc. The Murabaha models happen to be the best as the results got through them are same as the interest-based finance models. The Murabaha model is a sale where the seller specifically mentions the amount that has been spent on the purchase of an asset and then sells it to another person or the buyer after adding some amount of profit to it. The assets managed under these products surpass the profit and loss sharing methods like Mudaraba and Musharaka. In Musharaka model, the capital labor or skills are both shared jointly by a partner. Murabaha could be said to be an Islamic mortgage transaction, as here the bank, instead of lending money to purchase an asset, the bank buys the asset from the seller and resells it to the buyer at a profit and lets the buyer pay in installments. Since the profit of bank cannot be stated clearly, thus there are no extra charges or penalties for late payment. This is why, to safeguard itself against any payment evasion, the bank is quite strict in asking for security. The lands or goods are registered in the name of the buyer as the transaction commences. Another way of leasing real estate is through ijarawa iktina. The loans for vehicles are also handled in a similar model. The vehicle is sold at an augmented price compared to the market price to the debtor, and the ownership of the vehicle is given only once the load is cleared. Musharaka al-Mutanakisa is applied by some Islamic banks for home loans. The borrower and the bank get into a partnership and agree to provide capital at a certain percentage to acquire the property. The borrower then pays rent under the partnership entity. The proceeds from the rent of the present equity share of partnership is shared by the borrower and the borrower who is in the partnership also purchases the bank's share of the property at decided installments till the full equity is moved to the borrower and the partnership is over. In case of any default, both the borrower and the bank get a part of the proceeds when the property is sold, depending on the present equity of either of them. This way is usually followed for floating rates as per the present market rate in countries that follow dual banking system such as Malaysia. Islamic financial institutions use many other ways of making business transactions. Islamic banks lend out their money to companies who issue by floating rate interest loans. Along with the individual rate of return of the company, the floating rate of interest is attached. So the bank's profit on the loan is equivalent to a specific percentage of the company's profit. As the principal amount is cleared, the profit sharing also comes to a stop. This is known as musharaka. Islamic banking is confined to transactions that are acceptable only in Islam, which exclude pork, alcohol or gambling, etc. The main aim in Islamic finance and banking is to invest ethically and buy morally. In books, Islamic banking is full reserve banking, where the banks achieve a 100% reserve ratio, but in practice this actually doesn't happen. There are no situations or examples where 100% reserve banking exists. Chapter 3. Industry. Financial institutions in Islam take several different forms. They could be proper Islamic financial institutions, Islamic subsidiaries of conventional financial institutions, and Islamic windows in conventional financial institutions. Sharia advisory councils and consultants. All the Islamic banking institutions and banks need to comply with the Sharia law, thus they offer services and products which are legal according to the law. A Sharia Supervisory Board, SSB, is established so they are advised about the activities and the operations they are undertaking. Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, AAOIFI, defines the Sharia Supervisory Board as a self-governing organization made of special lawyers or jurists in fiqh al-muamalat or the Islamic commercial theory. The SSB is assigned with the job of guiding, studying and overseeing the undertakings of the Islamic financial institution. The legal opinions or fatwas and ruling of the board will be obligatory. This comprises of verifying transactions for compliance with Sharia. Any income which doesn't comply under the rules of Sharia is disposed. The board certifies all the financial instruments only if they are complying with Sharia. The board members also advise on the sharing of income amongst all the shareholders and investors. It also calculates the zakat, which is payable by all Islamic financial institutions. Zakat is the compulsory donation of a portion of one's wealth to charity. The organizations that have handed out standards and guidelines for complying with Sharia laws are Islamic Financial Services Board, Fiqh Academy of the OIC, and Accounting and Auditing Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions. Every financial institution has its own SSB, and they are not under anyone's obligation to follow these set standards and guidelines. For instance, National Sharia Advisory Council, set up at Bank Negara, Malaysia, advises the bank on all the facets of the operations. The Ulama Council is responsible for the bank in Indonesia. There are many firms who have emerged lately offering Sharia service to the Islamic financial institutions. The World Database for Islamic Banking and Finance, WDIBF, has been established to offer information about all the websites who deal with this type of banking. Financial Accounting Standards. Since 1993, AAOIFI has been publishing the standards for Islamic financial institutions. All the standards and norms given out by the AAOIFI are all compulsory for Islamic financial institutions in Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Sudan. Other Muslim countries vouch for them too. AAOIFI was established in 1990 under the name Financial Accounting Organization for Islamic Banks and Financial Institutions. The headquarters for the company is in Bahrain. Other countries also have their individual accounting standards. Iranian banks use provisional interest-based transactions and follow accounting standards of conventional banking. Although the standards of AAOIFI are followed across the globe, Iran doesn't follow them. Financial accounting standards are issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. Supporting institutions. With the cooperation of central banks of Sudan, Brunei and Indonesia and their governments, a standardization organization for the Islamic capital market operations and capital, the International Islamic Financial Market, was set up. The permanent office for the establishment is situated in Manama, Bahrain. It is not a governing body and most Islamic banks don't execute the recommendations given by it. On January 3, 1994, the Bank Negara Malaysia established the Islamic Interbank Money Market. Bank Negara Malaysia has also put in place mechanisms to regulate the liquidity needs of the Islamic financial institutions, funding and amending portfolios over the short term. The central banks of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Sudan, Malaysia, Pakistan and Kuwait founded the Islamic Financial Services Board on November 3, 2002 in Kuala Lumpur. With the board, the AAOIFI, Islamic Development Bank and IMF were also founded. The objective of the Islamic Financial Services Board is to synchronize and standardize the functioning and the monitoring of Islamic financial institutions' principles and capital sufficiency, corporate authority and risk management in consultation with an extensive collection of investors after an extensive procedure. It complements the task of the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. The Islamic International Rating Agency began operating in Bahrain on July 2005. There are 17 multilateral development organizations, rating agencies and banks where it draws its sponsorship from. Dow Jones Islamic Market Index, DJIMI, was created in 1996. Fiqh Academy of OIC has ratified the index. There are 3 different levels of screening. Companies whose total debts, when divided by the 1 year's average market capitalization, are more than the total sourced funds, or 33%, are eliminated. All activities not permissible under the Islamic law, such as pornography, alcohol, pork, etc., are all eliminated, and any companies having which have impure expenditure or income of more than 5 to 10% of their expenditure or income are also eliminated. Citigroup had established the Dow Jones Citigroup Sukuk Index in 2006. The Ftse Global Islamic Index was launched in 1998. There were 15 Islamic alphabetical listings for different regions. The MSCI Islamic Index series was launched in 2007. There are about 69 markets that it covers. Organizations. Some of the top training and research institutions that have been established and dedicated to Islamic economic and finance are as under: Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Islamic Finance Training and Center for Islamic Banking and Finance Training. Malaysia, International Center for Education in Islamic Finance. Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, Islamic Development Bank, IDB, Islamic Research and Training Institute, IRTI, Islamic Economic Institute, and King Abdulaziz University. Dubai, Ethica Institute of Islamic Finance and Islamic Finance Academy. South Africa, Islamic Finance Institute of South Africa. Qatar, Center of Banking and Financial Studies. London, United Kingdom, Institute of Islamic Banking and Insurance. Birmingham, United Kingdom, Islamic Finance Advisory and Assurance Services. Islamabad, Pakistan, School of Islamic Banking and Finance. Bahrain, Center for Islamic Finance of Bahrain, Institute of Banking and Finance, BIBF. Chapter 4. Transaction Terminologies in Islamic Finance. Wakala means power of attorney. This happens when a person makes another responsible and reliable person in charge of the transactions on his or her behalf. Wadiya means safekeeping. In Islamic finance, the bank is the trustee and keeper of the funds. When someone deposits funds in the bank, it guarantees to pay back the full amount of the deposit or whatever is outstanding as and when demanded by the depositor. The bank may pay the customer with hiba for letting the bank use the funds. Takaful can be called Islamic insurance. The members contribute money into a system which guarantees each one of them against damages or loss. In short, a person's loss or damages from a certain incident is shared among a group of people instead of just the person with whom the incident has happened facing it. The group of members are bound by law. Tawarruk can be explained as a financial product under Islamic finance that lets the clients raise money quickly while also adhering to the Sharia law of no interest. A customer can buy an easy-to-sell asset from the Islamic bank at a higher price, the payment for which would have to be made later, and then sell the asset immediately to get cash. When literally translated in English, tawarruk means turns to silver. Sukuk is the somewhat same as the conventional bonds. They are usually known as Islamic bonds. The difference between sukuk and conventional bonds is that all interest-based aspects in sukuk are replaced by asset-based income structure, where ijara or wakala contracts are used. When it comes to issuing of these Islamic bonds, the process is much like that done for conventional banking. Sukuk is the plural form of sak. Qard Hasan is a loan which is given on goodwill. There is no interest charge on this amount. The borrower needs to pay just the amount borrowed, but the borrower can pay back a little more than the borrowed amount as a token of appreciation if he or she wishes to. The borrower is not obligated to pay anything forcefully, it is completely free will. Most Muslims consider Qard Hasan to be the only type of loan which actually follows the Islamic law of prohibition of riba. Ijara B. Istisna is a contract of exchange that is applied in a case of certain made-to-order things and the date of delivery is of a later period. It is a long-term contract where one party builds, manufactures or constructs assets where they are in obligation from the producer or manufacturer to deliver them to the customer when the job is completed. For instance, a construction company can finance some parts of the building. Hiba, in terms of Islamic banking, can be termed as a gift which is given voluntarily in return for a benefit obtained or a loan offered. When the banks pay their customers a gift on their savings accounts, which is a profit the bank has made from lending the funds from savings accounts, this voluntary gift is known as hiba. In conventional banking, interest is guaranteed, but here hiba is neither time-bound nor is it guaranteed. According to the Islamic teachings, hiba is disturbing one's assets without expecting something back. The teachings say that Muslims should donate gift to others so that they foster love and cooperation in the society. Buy salam is an agreement where payment is made in advance for merchandises to be delivered later on. The seller agrees to supply certain merchandise to the buyer on an agreed date in the future for which an advance payment, full price of the merchandise, is made at the time of the contract. It is important that the full details of the merchandise that is to be purchased be specified so there full clarity and no dispute arise in the future while the goods are delivered. Goods can be used to sell under buy salam, and these goods cannot be silver, gold or currencies grounded on these metals. Except for this, buy salam covers mostly all the goods which can be described in terms of quality, quantity and artisanship. Conditions and features of salam. A transaction will be taken as a salam only if the buyer has paid the seller the full price of the goods in advance at the time of sale. This will show that there is no situation of debt that is arising here, which is something that is not acceptable in Sharia. Any product which belongs to a farm or field cannot go under effect in salam. This is because of uncertainty. For instance, if the seller wishes to supply mangoes from his orchard, then salam cannot be effective here, as there may be a possibility where there is a storm or fire and the trees are destroyed. The seller wouldn't be able to make any delivery. This applies to all the goods whose supply is uncertain. It is significant that the quality of the merchandise which is going to be purchased under buy salam is clearly mentioned so that there is no space for disagreement in future at the time of its delivery. Every small detail must be mentioned. The quantity of the merchandise must be clearly mentioned. If the goods is to be determined by its weight, then that should also be determined when the contract is being drawn. The same needs to be done if a product has to be measured. Something which is measured to quantify cannot be weighed and vice versa. A specified date and place of delivery must be clearly mentioned in the contract. A salam contract can also state that if the date of delivery is faltered, the supplier will pay a certain amount of penalty. However, this penalty amount can be used only for charitable purposes and is not included in the income of the buyer. The buyer can also ask the supplier to provide collateral security to ensure that the goods are delivered by the supplier on time. Musawama means bargaining. In Islamic finance, the term musawama is a sale where the price of the services or goods is not disclosed by the seller. The seller is not obligated to reveal the cost when the negotiation process is happening. The seller and the buyer negotiate the selling price of the goods or services without revealing the cost. This is just opposite of murabaha, where the buyer is completely aware of the price or the cost of the asset. The situation of musawamaha usually occurs when it is not possible to conclude the price or service of the goods or service, or when the merchandise comprises of several products. There are some restrictions in musawamaha under Sharia law. The sale must happen instantly. There will not be any future dates for a sale to happen. Murabaha is a form of sale of which takes place for vehicle, real estate or commodities. The costs incurred, the selling and purchase price and the profit earned are clearly disclosed when the sale agreement is being drawn. Murabaha is a popular way of Islamic finance mechanism which has been in place since the inception of Islamic financial institutions. The working of murabaha is when the buyer or lender pays the seller or bank for the commodities over a period of time, while recompensing the seller or bank for the time taken to pay back in the form of profit. A fixed rate of profit is determined for the purchase of an asset. This is a fixed income loan. There is no compensation given to the bank for the late payments made to the bank. This means the bank doesn't have any authority to charge any sort of extra profit on the late payments made by the buyer. The asset will continue to be in the mortgage of the bank till the default payment is settled. This type of finance system is also popular in some stores in North America. This is known as rent-to-own arrangement, which can take place for appliances or furniture. Mudaraba is a sort of partnership or a type of profit and loss sharing contract where one partner is the brains of the business while the other is the provider or the financer of the business. One partner finances or funds the full business while the other partner provides the business with labor, skills and expertise that is required in running the business. There is a set ratio of profit which is mentioned in the contract, and when the profits earned from the business is then distributed according to this predetermined ratio. The partner who is investing the money is referred to as Rab or Mal, while the partner who is investing skills and time is referred to as Mudarib. If there is loss incurred from the business, the Rab or Mal loses money while the Mudarib loses his efforts and time spent in running the business. Economists say that a long-term finance partnership in Mudaraba is both expensive and risky compared to the long-term investment in the conventional banking. Bai Muajal means sale for which payment is made at a future fixed date or within a fixed period. A shorter name for it would be credit sale. It can be described as an agreement or contract between a seller and a buyer where the seller sells goods to a buyer who buys it in an agreed amount which is payable in lump sum on a fixed date or in certain fixed installments within a given period of time. In a bank, the customer is the buyer and the bank is the seller. Here, the customer agrees to pay the bank the said amount on the said date according to the contract in a lump sum amount or fixed installments in a set period. It is a credit sale of commodities where the bank transfers the ownership of the goods to the customer, but the payment is given by the customer later on or deferred for a certain period. It is important to note that in Bai Mujal, the bank is a financer to the customer, not in a way that it finances the purchase of the commodities by the customer. Instead, it finances by deferring the acceptance of sale price of commodities, which it is selling to the customer. If the bank simply makes a payment for the goods purchased and taken by the customer from the seller instead of drafting a contract with the seller or not buying the goods from the seller, then the agreement that would be made to receive the payments against the goods from the customer would just be a loan to the buyer, and anything extra received over this amount will be a riba. Thus it is important that the bank make the purchase of goods on behalf of the bank, and the remittance for the price against the goods bought should be made on behalf of the bank. If the payment of the price of the commodity is made in the name of the customer, then the excess is nothing but riba. The bank is liable for all the risk of the goods till it is safely delivered to the customer or buyer. The bank can sell the goods at a higher price than the actual purchased price of the goods. The bank also reserves the right to be silent on the actual cost price of the goods while quoting a higher price to the buyer. Baibit Hamanajil is an Islamic financing method which is quite popularly used in Malaysia. Since 1983, almost all Islamic financial institutions in Malaysia have been following this concept of Baibit Hamanajil. It is basically a deferred payment sale and is considered somewhat as murabaha, but here, in Baibit Hamanajil, the payment is made in deferred basis. Different countries use different names to address it, but the working happens to be the same. It's basically a sales contract where the dates for payment for the purchase made is preset on a deferred payment basis. The selling price of the asset is mentioned in the agreement, which includes the profit. Usually the assets that are dealt under this system of Islamic finance are machinery, land, equipment and building. Many consider Baibit Hamanajil as a substitute of the finance lease also. The customers use it to acquire assets of higher value, which help them in generating profits in the future in installments. Under the contract, the customer acquires the asset and is supposed to make the payments in installments according to the time mentioned in the contract. The customer also has to pay profit to the financial institution that is arranging the assets. The scholars mention that the contract should be clear and nothing containing in it should be vague or kara. Therefore, the asset that has physical existence should be identified by the customer to avoid kara. But if the contract concerns the sale or purchase of a house that is yet to be constructed, then the legality of bai bathamanjo is questionable because the result of this contract is not certain. Bai al-ina. Just opposite of bai bathamanjo, and under this financing method, the bank sells an asset to the customer on deferred payment installments and then purchases it back from the customer, creating a debt. Therefore, there are two agreements made under this type of finance. In the first agreement, the bank makes a sale of an asset to the customer at a price agreed by them, for which the payment can be made by the customer in installments to the bank over a period decided by the bank. The bank then purchases back the same asset from the customer at a lower price. When this transaction is completed, the bank pays the customer a lump sum amount of the asset decided and agreed by them in cash immediately. The difference got by the bank is its profit, which is decided in advance. Most Sharia scholars are against this way of finance. However, there are many financial institutions in Malaysia that follow this concept of providing loan to the people. Aqad is a term which means contract. It means commitment among two parties. It has been derived from the Arabic word which means aqdi, agreement. It is said to be used for non-profitable transactions. Islam forbids a single contract to have more than one agreement. In conventional banking, this is quite the opposite, as there are several agreements made in one contract. Another shorter version of aqad is aqd, which is used specifically in marriage contracts. Conclusion. Money in Islam is not considered as an asset that can be used ethically to earn returns. Money is seen as a medium of exchange. The main principle of Islamic finance and banking is purely grounded on risk sharing, which happens between the customer and the bank, which is completely different from conventional banking, where there is a risk transfer. For example, if a customer wishes to purchase a vehicle, the bank buys it for the customer instantly and sells it back to the customer at a higher price. This way, both of them are sharing the risk, and any profit that is made by the bank is considered to be a reward for the risk that it is sharing with the customer. Although Islamic banking has seen fair growth in the past few years, it represents a little more than 1% of conventional finance presently. The pace of growth, however, is fairly high, which is about 18% on an average per year, but yet it may not be sufficient to replace conventional banking. There are many banks, investors and companies who still prefer conventional banking, but there have been instances when Islamic banking have managed to stand strong through crisis, while some conventional banks have crashed. As investors, one is likely to seek profit-earning opportunities in a bank, but for the followers of Islam, Islamic banking and finance is more than profit. These Islamic institutions help them to uphold their teachings by utilizing their money in a truthful way, as their teachings permit them. About IntraBooks. IntraBooks delivers up-to-the-minute information covering everything on a topic in only 1 hour of reading. Our book are written to give essential information in a straight-to-the-point, easy-to-read format. We have cut out technical jargon, waffle, and unnecessary filler to ensure you get the essential information you need to achieve your goals with confidence.